There's a specific moment that haunts most men. It happens quietly, usually in the middle of the night, when you're alone in your apartment and your phone buzzes with another wedding invitation. And in that moment, something ancient wakes up inside you, a question, a doubt, a voice that sounds like your mother, your friends, the culture itself, all whispering the same thing. Shouldn't you be doing something about this? Shouldn't you be looking? Shouldn't you be fixing the fact that you're alone? What if I told you that voice is lying? Not metaphorically, literally lying. Because the research, the psychology, the actual data on male singlehood in 2026 reveals something that nobody in the mainstream wants to say out loud. For a specific kind of man, and if you're watching this, you might be that man. Staying single might be the most intelligent decision you could possibly make. And I'm not talking about being alone because you're afraid or broken or waiting for something better. I'm talking about choosing solitude as an act of power. This is what we're unpacking today. Let me tell you about James. He's 43, been divorced for 6 years, spent 3 of those years rebuilding his life from the ground up. And last month, his sister finally asked him the question everyone had been wondering. Why aren't you dating? Don't you want to try again? And James told her something that changed how she saw him. He said, I tried it. I know what it costs. I know what it feels like when you're inside a life that you didn't choose. And I know exactly what I would have to give up to go back into that system. The answer is no. Not because I'm afraid, because I'm not. That moment reveals something psychological that we almost never talk about. The difference between choosing solitude and suffering solitude is the difference between power and pain. And for the men walking this earth in 2026, that distinction has never been more critical. The world we're living in right now is fundamentally different from the world your parents navigated. Back then, a man without a partner was genuinely incomplete. The infrastructure of daily life required 2 people. You needed someone to manage the household. You needed the financial security of a second income. You needed the social legitimacy that marriage provided. Without a partner, you were vulnerable, isolated, incomplete by the very structure of society. That world no longer exists. And this is crucial. Most people haven't actually processed that yet. They're still living inside the old story. We're still telling men that their value is incomplete until they find someone else. But the technology, the economics, and the psychology have all changed. You can live independently with more comfort and more freedom than at any point in human history. You can meet your needs without asking permission from anyone. And that changes everything. Consider Marcus. 39, software engineer, never been in a serious relationship. When people ask why, he gives them a simple answer. He looked at the relationships around him and asked himself one honest question. Do I want that? Every time the answer was no. Not because he was damaged or broken, but because he was paying attention. He was watching his friends compromise on their dreams to accommodate their partners. He was seeing the slow erosion of their autonomy. He was observing the patterns that nobody wants to acknowledge, and he made a choice. He chose to build something instead. In the 7 years since that choice, he's built a 6-figure business, traveled to 30 countries, developed genuine mastery in his craft, and created a life that actually belongs to him. When people pity his singleness, he almost laughs. He's not lonely. He's free. And freedom, actual freedom, is intoxicating. Here's what the psychology research actually shows, and this is where it gets interesting. The men most likely to be satisfied with their single lives are not the ones who are single by accident or rejection. They're the ones who chose it. When a man actively chooses solitude, what researchers call self-determined motivation for singlehood, something happens in his brain. His sense of agency increases, his self-knowledge deepens, his psychological resilience spikes. He's not white-knuckling through loneliness, he's cultivating power. Every morning that belongs to him is an asset. Every evening he invests in his own work is a compounding return. His attention, which is the scarcest resource in the modern world, belongs entirely to him. Think about what that means practically. A man in a serious relationship spends 20 to 30 hours a week on relationship maintenance. That's 50 to 70 hours a month. That's 600 to 840 hours a year. Over a decade, that's 6,000 to 8,400 hours that are not his own. That's his time. That's his attention. That's his life being allocated to managing another person's expectations, emotions, and agenda. For a man over 40 who has already built himself, who has already figured out who he is and what he wants, that's not an addition to his life. That's a reorganization. That's a fundamental restructuring of his entire existence around someone else's needs. And yes, the mythology says that's love, but the psychology says that's cost. Thomas is 51 now. He went through a divorce at 42. It nearly destroyed him. The financial consequences were severe. The emotional consequences were worse. But the psychological consequence that nobody talks about is that he lost himself inside the architecture of that marriage. He spent years not knowing what he actually wanted because he was too busy managing what someone else needed. When it ended, he spent 3 years in what he calls his laboratory. He ran, he read, he traveled alone. He sat with his own mind long enough to hear what it was actually saying. Today, 10 years into his second chapter as a single man, he tells people that he's not just recovered from the divorce. He's recovered himself. He's become the person he actually is, not the person he thought he had to be. And when people suggest he should get back out there, he tells them something that makes them uncomfortable. He says, "I know what that costs. I chose this instead." But here's where we have to be honest, because pretending that single life is purely uncomplicated would be a lie. There are real difficulties, the evenings that feel heavy, the holidays that hit differently, the moments when something extraordinary happens and there's no one to call who will understand it the way you need them to, the nights when the silence feels less like freedom and more like absence. These are real, they matter, and any man who tells you that single life is purely liberation is either very young or not being honest. But, and this is the critical distinction, there's a profound difference between the challenges of chosen solitude and the damage of staying in the wrong relationship. The man who has been through that knows this in his bones. He knows what it costs to be inside a life that doesn't belong to him, the slow erosion, the compromises that accumulate into a person you don't recognize. The morning you wake up and look at yourself in the mirror and don't know who's looking back. Compared to that, the challenges of single life are not just manageable, they're preferable. Here's what you need to understand about the modern world. The culture is still telling the old story. It's still measuring a man's worth by his relationship status. It's still suggesting in 1,000 subtle ways that a man without a partner is incomplete. But the data tells a different story. The men most satisfied with their lives in 2026 are the ones who've stopped asking for permission to be alone. They're the ones who've recognized that freedom, real freedom, is not something that happens to you. It's something you choose, and then you defend, and then you build something inside of it. They're the ones who've stopped apologizing for their own lives. So here's what I'm asking you to sit with. not to answer out loud, just to sit with honestly in the quiet of your own mind. If you stopped apologizing for how you're living, what would you actually build? Not what should you build? Not what you're supposed to build. What would you actually build if you gave yourself permission? What is the work that's been waiting for you while you were carrying the weight of everyone else's judgment? What is the version of yourself that only solitude and freedom could create? Because that's the real question. Not why you're still single, but what you're going to do with the extraordinary gift of a life that's entirely your own. In 2026, the man who knows himself, who builds deliberately, and who refuses to apologize for his solitude, he's not behind, he's ahead. He's not missing out, he's winning. And if that lands for you, if something in that resonates with the quiet knowing you already have, then subscribe. Because we go deep into this every single week. Until next time.